Before we play the opening song, we're going to play something from Nealon-Cook. Gigi Foster is joining us too, but most of you probably know who she is, but you might not be as aware of who Roz is. And so this is from a Rumble video she did 3 years ago, just to show you the convictions and the courage of this woman. Here we go.
Urgent scientific debate of our times. And I don't care if you thought you were doing the right thing. It is not your place to veto medical expertise. It's not my place. We don't have that sort of knowledge. So step out and leave it to the experts. To the government, with respect for your endeavours to keep us safe, as you can see, there are many very highly credentialed experts who are strongly arguing that the current Australian policy is not only highly flawed, mostly unnecessary, but causing far more harm than this virus was ever going to the working aged or younger healthy population. What's more, your measures are actually reducing people's natural immunity for multiple reasons and making all of us more vulnerable to a huge range of other health challenges. So I call on the government as a mandatory reporter, please engage with this material immediately. Every day, the mental health costs are increasing and every day people are dying. Get the major scientific arguments on the table. Let them punch it out publicly, now. Ideally with full publicity. We need to know of any potential conflicts of interest, previous disciplinary action in their fields, that sort of thing. There are multiple scientists screaming at us not to vaccinate children and pregnant women until much more research has been undertaken. I mean, pregnant women, surely we've been here before with thalidomide. We know how things can go terribly, terribly wrong. And to be clear, I'm fully vaccinated. I always have been. I plan to have my COVID shots, of course, but I've been quite ill in the last few months and delayed them until I was stronger. But now, having heard all these censored scientific experts, there is no way I'm going to have these shots until it's been publicly debated that one, it's safe, and two, that it's even necessary. Current policy involves highly coercive and manipulative techniques to get people jabbed as quickly as possible. You must hear the other side, because if these other scientists are right and you don't listen, your hands are covered in blood. To parents who are listening, the mums especially, because 99.99% of us would fight to the death to protect our kids. There's a current push to get older children vaccinated as a top priority, yet we know that a small number of children have died as a result of this vaccination. Yes, it's a very small risk, but personally as a mum, I won't accept any risk unless it's defending against an enormous threat. Please, from the bottom of my heart, if you are planning on vaccinating your child, please make sure you're extremely well versed in this controversy. And please don't feel pushed or harassed by anyone to do so.
Historically, we are the debris, forgotten faces, never more to be. Instead of legends fighting for something that had no guarantees, living ghosts we chose to live and die as their worker bees. Why didn't we break out from their hide? Why didn't we follow our own sun to another life? Why didn't we scroll over all their flowers? Brothers okay to be free. Brothers and sisters, it's time to be freedom to be you, freedom to be you, freedom to be me. I can feel your secret vibrations like our last fading song. It's time, oh, it's time to be free. I can hear your vibrations like a final human cry. Oh, it's time, oh, it's time to be
Okay, let's get going. First in, my partner in crime, Dr. Paul Oosterhuis. How you doing?
MJJ, good to see you.
Now, Gigi's in Brussels, so she's going to be able to say your surname perfectly. But before we bring on the G, let's bring in Roz, who's got this all together. Roz, thank you for doing this. I'm not looking forward to it, but thank you for doing it. And how are you feeling?
I actually feel really emotional watching that, Michael. That's 4 years ago. It wasn't 3 because it was right in those horrific lockdowns.
Okay. Yeah, it said in
Yeah.
the I tried to find the thing. It said 3.
Yeah.
It said 3 in the Rumble thing. Yeah, it's very emotional.
Very
Very
emotional. And you
And they
forget
sacked you
how
for it.
insane it was then. And I look at it and I was a bit teary. I was skeletal. I was about 2 stone lighter because I was so frightened about speaking out. You know, it's anyway.
And they sacked you because of it.
They took my license and burnt me at the stake. Yeah. Oh, bless Sally. Thank you, darling.
And now from Brussels, we have the fabulous Gigi Foster. So I'll put her up there.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I think Sally is here too, actually. Sally Price. She's visiting the castle at the moment. This is the castle in Brussels that is the campus home of Academia Liberamentis. So I'm here for a week of teaching and just to enjoy the sunshine and the community environment here.
Cool. So, Roz, how do you want to begin this?
How should we start? Maybe just a quick explanation of why Gigi and I are here. Obviously, this is a roundtable that had a panel of reproductive health professionals from around the world. Let me just close that over there. But we have been sort of censored and stymied at every turn trying to get this out, and we'll speak about that in a moment. But the reason we're here tonight is to sort of set the stage so everyone can understand what the blocks are that are keeping people from seeing what's going on. And maybe are you going to share the slides, Michael? What I'm going to do, so I'm going to do sort of a quick, try and keep it to 10 minutes primer on psychology.
Yeah, no worries.
Bear
And
with
look,
me.
we will take questions, guys, but what we'll do is we'll star them and we'll do them at the end if anyone's still here. So we'll go through there. So, okay, so here we go.
Yeah,
And
so
we'll
this
stop the comments for now. Okay, on your way, Roz.
Brilliant. So this is a bit of a clunky one. I'm not sure what happened with the pagination there, but really it's just what we're going to talk about tonight. You know, there's all these forces that are keeping so many people from seeing what's going on. And it's almost like a magic trick, that when you have seen a magic trick and how it works, once you know, you can never be fooled again. And so we're just going, sorry,
that was the call for lunch. Go ahead.
Okay. So, so we're going to go through these 4 pieces. I'm going to try and do a 10-minute primer on the psychological piece. And this is, I know there will be lots of questions on this. Often it's sort of, 2-3 hours to run through it, but I'll just give the bare bones. We're going to talk about propaganda and nudging, which is Gigi's sort of wheelhouse amongst many other pieces. And then, some examples of what they've been doing with the data to sort of, keep things hidden and confusing. And then we'll talk more about censorship and media control. So if we can just move on to that first slide, Michael. Brilliant. All right. So hang on, let me just bring mine up. 2 seconds. Okay. So really, I think it's really important to understand, because hang on, I'm on the wrong piece. Bear with me. I find it with psychology, when you understand, again, it's almost like if you are working with a car, if you understand how the engine works, it really helps being able to drive better. And over the last 4 years, I found people who have just a really basic understanding of psychology, it helps them understand why we have, for example, we have so many friends, most of us who are listening, that are, people we love, good, intelligent people who just cannot see what we can see. And so over the years, I certainly in the early days, and I'm sure many of you did, we just keep trying to give data. We share podcasts, we share rumbles and Substacks, and nothing goes in. And I think that the point to clarify is that what those that can't see is missing. It's not that they don't have enough data. It's not that if we just give them one more piece, then suddenly they'll see everything. It's a problem of consciousness. And really, it's about consciousness and levels of psychological defense that stop people from taking in this information. So this first slide, this is a really critical piece to understand, which is that when humans are under significant threat, which is what COVID, for example, was supposed to be, the way our body and brain and nervous system process information completely changes. And we have this really fast, sort of powerful survival system that sole purpose is to keep us alive if we're under really catastrophic threat. You've probably heard it called the fight, flight, freeze mode. It's medical term is the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And what's really important to understand is that the parts of the brain and body, the parts of the brain that run it are underneath conscious awareness. They sort of, have been evolved many, for hundreds of thousands of years. We share them with all mammals, a lot of lower level animals as well. But the whole purpose of these parts of the brain is to keep us alive. And so when this happens, the sort of more rational parts of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, etc., which has the analytical problem solving, sort of deals with those pieces, those tend to go offline. So when we're in fight flight, what happens is it's very, very quick. And so all of the blood from our body goes to our heart, is diverted there, and then it goes to our large limbs, so our upper arm muscles and our leg muscles, so we can fight, right, or run away from a tiger. And obviously, right, that's great if we need to jump out of the way of a car, but there's not so much blood to go to other parts of our body and our brain. And so a lot is taken away from this part, which is, what we use for thinking and problem solving. And so when we're in this fight flight, the primitive parts of the brain are running everything. And crucially, you know, we can no longer see the field because there's less blood up here. We are restricted in our range of thought. And, you know, this is sort of law of the jungle stuff. And it's great if there's a tiger or a car is suddenly coming for you because you can jump out of the way. But obviously you can understand in modern day why it can get us into a lot of trouble. And so bottom line is when we are terrified and we're fully escalated, it's really hard to take on board different information. So constricting it and keeping us focused on what we know gives us the best chance of survival in a catastrophic situation. So the other piece I think is really important. Actually, can you go on to the next slide, Michael? I can't remember what's there. Yeah. So everyone remembers this, and these were the sort of pieces that were in the media all the time when we had this sort of fear porn media all the time pumping out 24/7. That was activating those fight flight parts of the brain. And when people were really escalated, you can't take in other stuff. So if we're there sort of trying to send, you know, other information about COVID, it can't be taken on because all of this high drama information is holding center stage. So that's sort of that, you know, the simple mechanics of how our body works. Another really key piece to take on is understanding the existential threat piece. So maybe the next slide there, Michael. And there's two parts to this. There's really how we respond to, oh, sorry, there was another, yeah, I didn't mean to show that one actually. But no, this is a really good point, right? So no, it's good. I'll just say very quickly, you know, and I think everyone can relate to this, is that this is how everything seems to be reduced at the moment. We've got this us and them around the world in so many things. And, you know, Gigi can speak to this later. The story of your mum and dad, I loved in your censored piece. You know, it used to be okay to have nuance, didn't it? We could disagree, we could converse, we could have different opinions. And in 2025, we can't. It's us and them, it's football tribes, and everything is really reduced down, oversimplified, dualist. It's, yeah, we've just lost so much of humanity and so much nuance. But the next piece, if you go on to the next slide. So these are the existential pieces. And the first one is ejection from the group. And a lot of people underestimate how important this is. I think especially people that might be here tonight, because we're all a bit unique in that we actually went against the group. Yeah. But it's extraordinarily powerful. Group psychology, we're ultimately, as humans, as mammals, we are pack animals. And to give a really sort of simple explanation, I love this model. It came out, it was a guy called Mark Leary, and it's his sociometer theory. It came out about 30 years ago. And what he looked at was that his model was all about group inclusion status. And it explains that we all have, and again, running unconsciously, a sort of internal monitor, sort of like a smoke alarm, and it's constantly scanning for how we are being perceived by other members of the group. And there can be many groups, we're all part of many, many groups. And again, this is lower brain regions. No one's sitting there thinking about this. Maybe if you're a teenager, you are. But again, it's sort of the limbic areas and the amygdala. And if there is even a sort of potential whiff of group rejection, then self-instigating behavior is brought in, which ultimately means conformity. Yeah. So really, we are pack animals, and we can think of ourselves as these highly intelligent and individual humans. But when there is trauma, when there is threat, we do operate very unconsciously and at these really sort of primal levels. What I think is really interesting about this theory actually is Mark Leary wrote this about 30 years ago, and it was long before social media came in. And if you think, you know, most of us here, I'm sure a lot of the audience have teenagers, yeah? And with social media, it's a nightmare because they're all looking, aren't they, for the likes and oh, I haven't got enough likes, and they will take the posts down. It's, you know, always, am I part of the pack? Am I going to be accepted? So in terms of the ejection from the group and why it is such an existential threat, it's that in survival terms, it equates to death. If you go to the next slide, please, Michael. So there's this traditional Inuit capital punishment equivalent, you know, in Australia. Well, in the West, we had, I don't know, the guillotine and hanging and all sorts of things. But in this traditional culture, they knew that the very worst thing you could do to someone was to banish them. So they would give them the tools to survive. They'd give them a canoe. They would give them something to hunt with and a water skin. And they were sent away for life because they knew that was the very, very worst thing that you could do, which I think is really interesting. And if you think about, you know, a friend or a family member maybe that you tried to share information with about COVID back in the day, and maybe you still are. If you are, please don't. Certainly not with friends and family members. But you could get a little foot in the door, right? And what will they do? They will go and check. They'll jump on Facebook. They'll jump on Google and go and see what the groups are thinking. And that's it. They will go straight back to that corrective behavior and ignore us because the potential risk of banishment from the pack or the tribe is too much. So if we just get to that, I think there's one more slide. And this piece is really, oh, actually, I forgot about this one. So this is sort of how it relates to COVID. I mean, maybe the trance eyes are a bit mean, but really, I think it just shows how, because so many people we love, good people, have just fallen into these group norms because the group norms have been hijacked. And so there will be a dominance within that unsafe group that will keep them captured, you know, will keep them in trance. They've got the media, which is, you know, a group, most of it's captured, academia is captured, government and health systems, etc. All righty. Final slide. Okay. So this one is really, really important. And it's about what we call in psychology our primary caregivers. So babies, mammals, children form really, really powerful attachments to their primary caregiver, usually mum or dad. And it has to be an enormously strong attachment because we can't survive without a strong, caring adult until, you know, for a good decade, if we, you know, if the worst came to the worst. And there's a whole branch of psychology called attachment theory that looks into this. And, you know, sadly, we know that the vast majority of later adult psychopathology, so people that end up needing support as adults, are there because they had, you know, issues that could be traced back to those attachment relationships. And so in early childhood, where the primary caregiver is, again, this is all operating unconsciously, but perceived is operating in a way that is unsafe. So they're either abusing or neglecting the child. Children internalize that message is that that abuse or neglect is their fault, almost always, that they somehow deserved it or, you know, caused it or weren't worthy of the care. And, you know, sadly, these kids then tend to grow up with really shockingly low self-esteem. And the reason they do that, and this all does tie in and it will make sense in a moment, is because from a survival position, it is safer for a child to believe that they're somehow faulty than to take on the concept that their protector, their primary caregiver, is somehow faulty, whether they are abusive or neglectful. And the reason this is relevant to COVID is because we don't just sort of get to 18 or 21 or whatever and then throw off the shackles of attachment. What happens is we leave home, we get our own life, and there's sort of an unconscious transfer of that primary caregiving relationship to the government and the other institutions that are meant to keep us safe. Yeah. So, you know, we can in the West here think, oh, we've got all these checks and balances, you know, we get to vote out bad governments, we've got royal commissions, ho, we've got, I don't know, various different things. We've got the media keeping them in place. But just like with an unsafe parent, right? Because you can have children who are in really abusive family situations, but they will cling to that caregiver rather than go to a safer foster family, for example. And we've got the same thing with COVID. The existential threat of even fathoming that your government, your judiciary, your media, your academia are unsafe. They're either lying to you or they're, you know, stupid, which are both, is too much for most people to, you know, to take on. And Michael, you know, you said to me a couple of days ago something like, is it because people are so scared of the government and that's why they won't listen to us? No, this is why. It's a really primal, deep level. Taking that on board, it's just too much to bear. And, you know, I'm sure people jump in and say, well, why did we see, you know, why were we able to sort of ask the questions? And there are so many pieces on this. We could talk about that one for hours, but a lot of it is because we ourselves had slightly insecure attachments ourselves growing up. And it doesn't mean your parents didn't love you, but things, you know, kind of gone on to cause some fractures. And yeah, in this situation, it's actually better to have had some insecure attachments, something going on with your primary caregiver. I mean, an interesting example that I've used before is that we see a sort of overrepresentation of people that can see from countries that have had a lot of conflict. So we had a building site next door for quite a while, which was full of Croatians and Serbians and whatnot. They all know what's going on, but they grew up with really unsafe caregiving governments. So they have a very different way of processing information. They have a sort of more finely tuned smoke alarm looking out for danger, as it were. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, so I think, yeah, no, I can end there, I think, really, and we can go on. And
that was great. Thank you.
Good.
No, it was fascinating. But I think we probably should move on to why you two got involved with this infertility crisis at the round table and how that came to be.
Okay.
You know?
So for me, because since I lost my license 4 years ago, and I've been trying to look at, because at the end of the day, I think most of the audience know that the playbook that is used, and Gigi can talk about this in terms of the nudging and propaganda, etc., is psychological. There's been so much psychological manipulation that's gone on. And so I've always felt that the way out is to strategically sort of look at what they've done and unpick and reverse, as it were. And there's not a lot of that going on in the resistance. There's still a lot of chest beating and wanting to be on the white horse and just shouting louder and louder. And
agreed.
Because, you know, as you saw in that first video, like the fertility piece was always so huge for me, and just, I think, as it should be for any parent. And I've just watched, you know, for however long it's been now, these divisions for the last year or two just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the resistance is blowing up, or the freedom side, whatever you call them. There's so much infighting, people taking each other to court. I mean, it's crazy. And I thought the story of fertility crosses all this. It breaks down all. It's not right or left. It's not a religion. Everyone attaches to it. And if what they're saying, you know, is I won't go into it too much, but ultimately nothing else matters. I mean, who cares if Mrs. Macron is a Mr. or any of these pieces if we're blowing up fertility? Nothing is more important than this. So that's what brought me into it. How Gigi came into it is, you know, Gigi and I have done a lot through the last few years. And again, just for sort of strategic reasons, I knew she's so well known. She's a beautiful orator and speaker and professional. I knew she'd do a far better job running the round table than I would. So, yeah. That's how she's you.
I think you muted Gigi. You've muted yourself.
Sorry about that. I had to mute myself because lunch was happening. I'm not sure that I would have necessarily been, a better moderator than you, Roz, but I obviously appreciated the invitation to moderate the panel. And as probably a lot of people know, I'm an economist, and I have been speaking out against the lockdowns primarily during the early stage of COVID, starting in March 2020. And I think the reason why I saw things, just going back to what Roz was saying, I actually had a beautiful relationship with my mom and even with my father, but I was very much not included in the school groups, in the peer groups when I was a kid. I was the smart, goody two shoes teacher's pet, and the other girls didn't like that very much, and I thought that what they were interested in was stupid. And so I basically just didn't want even really to be part of it. But there was a rejection component there, but I learned very, very early on, like before living memory, to use intellectualization as a defense and to see the group as something to examine. Why would she say that? Why are they doing that? Why are they interested in that? And just think about it. And so using that kind of part of the brain that I suppose got shut off during COVID in a lot of people to understand what I was seeing that was potentially otherwise hurtful to me. But I had a very secure relationship with my mother, and I think that has carried on to very secure relationships in my adulthood, which have given me a security and an ability to, together with that ability to intellectualize what I'm seeing in the social world right around me, to basically just see through the COVID stuff and speak out about it without really feeling like I was in danger. Even though I was probably objectively a little bit in danger. I mean, certainly I thought I might lose my job. I got a few death threats and all that stuff, but mainly it was name calling. And I found that just fascinating from a social scientific standpoint. Why would you call another human being, a neoliberal Trump cannot death cult warrior? I mean, I knew I wasn't that. So, this and so many other things were clues that stuff was going on that was in the psychological realm, not in the realm of protecting health. So I was mainly interested in the lockdowns early on, but also was very much across the vaccine stuff when it started coming over the wires in mid-2021. And I looked at the animal studies, and I was very dubious that these things were safe and effective. But I also wasn't a healthcare provider, right, or a health professional of any sort. And I think, as Roz will probably know as well, there was a very strong degree of pressure to only speak within your lane during COVID. If you're going to speak at all, you really couldn't speak outside your lane. And so while I was speaking to my own family, including my children and my elder father and many other people in my family about the vaccines, I didn't go public with my statements, partly because, I thought, well, it's other people's choices whether to get this vaccination. I mean, I'm very much about medical freedom. If they want to do it, fine, that's their choice. And I didn't think it was in my area of responsibility to inform people about what I was seeing in the animal studies. It's not my expertise or professional, area, even though I thought I could probably parse some of those studies better than some of the mainstream health people were doing for the mainstream channels. But only, kind of recently have we, I think, started to get enough data that I feel personally comfortable as an economist approaching the question of what have been the human costs of these vaccines from an economic standpoint, where we just look at, okay, in aggregate, what are we talking about in terms of deaths? What are we talking about in terms of prevented lives? What are we talking about in terms of morbidity? We have enough data now just from other aggregate sources, not just VSafe and VAERS and these other vaccine-specific sources, but things like world data on fertility. And so I published a piece just about a month ago, I think, on Brownstone called Into the Abyss, where we try to do our best job as holistic economists. This is myself and my co-authors on the Great COVID Panic, to get a sense of how many people aren't going to be alive because of these vaccines. And it includes the fertility piece. So it includes effects on fertility and other ways of preventing life, as well as excess deaths, which is the other way that, you may see that kind of loss of life. But it was really the first time that I felt, and even with that blog, we went back and forth a lot with that, trying to get as much of a handle on these very difficult estimation methods that we could, because there's the different assumptions you have to make, and you have to just, explain and be as transparent as possible. Here's our best guess. And now we've put it out there. And we are inviting other people to have another go. If you don't like our assumptions, we've tried to be as transparent as we can. Well, make some other assumptions and give a guess of your own, right? To try to start this conversation in a scientific manner. And so, I do hope that people do continue that and look in other areas, not just the fertility stuff, but the excess deaths. In any event, as a mother myself, I did, of course, advise both of my children not to get this thing. And my son had a very interesting experience, very similar to what you described, Ross. So he put a message on Facebook in 2020 after they closed the dorms at his university. And he was like, well, I think that this administration is making the wrong decision. This is not the right thing to do. The data say that young people are not really vulnerable to this thing. Anybody who agrees with me, please like the post. Well, that went down like a lead balloon, as you can imagine. And his best friends accused him of being sexist and racist and all these other stupid things, right? And basically he just lost a lot of friends and respect there. And it really taught him something, really taught him, a lot about his world and people. And I think he still carries a bit of that today. That was a real scar for him. It's hard. He hasn't found a wife yet, possibly because of that. He just turned 26 a couple of weeks ago. Vaccinated girls in Atlanta, please put your hand up. Anyway, so yes, I was interested in the fertility stuff as a mom and just as a person who cares about the welfare of humanity, right? That's my ultimate maximand. I want what's best for people. And this is obviously an incredibly sensitive and really sacred area. So I was very honored to be asked to moderate the panel.
Okay, so thank you, Gigi. There's I'd give you some time. 26, it's different now. There's but so let's get to the heart of the matter now. What have you guys discovered on this round table, and why? The two questions, the other one would be longer, is why are you facing shadow banning and censorship if you're true or even partially true? Surely this should be on 60 Minutes now, and not on a podcast with a guy in a bus and Mr. Rose-colored glasses next to me, even though I adore the man. There's, this is crucial. So how did you get to the first figures, and what was it like to be on a round table with all these esteemed women looking at this data?
They're amazing. I mean, we said before, Gigi and I shouldn't actually be here tonight if the censorship and all of this shadow banning and nudging and data obfuscation, did I say it right that time? We'd be going straight to the panel, because this panel is the most extraordinary group of reproductive health professionals. They're all veterans. They've all got 30 plus years around the world, completely different professions, didn't know each other before, and they all saw these different signals of harm. And it's such a compelling story. But because we have hit so many blocks along the way, we thought it was important for people to understand what these different parts were that were sort of stopping it. So I've talked a bit about the psychology, which is our own internal piece, and others, but I thought what would be great. So Gigi is amongst many of the feathers in her hat. She's an expert in behavioral economics, which is psychological manipulation. Is that fair to say? And has done some brilliant work in terms of how a lot of those things have actually targeted some of our, most vulnerable impulses like love, etc. And I was hoping, Gigi, you might be able to talk about that a bit.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to, and I'll pick up on what you mentioned with the banned TED Talk. So I gave a TEDx talk late last year at UNSW entitled The Manipulator's Playbook. And it was essentially trying to inform people about how this manipulation stuff goes, what the tactics are that are used, and what the pattern is, so that people could recognize it when it's happening to them. And I drew some historical analogies to the Cultural Revolution in China and to the rise of the Third Reich in Germany. And of course, the COVID policy era, right? And in all of those cases, you saw this similar situation where the people in authority recognized, first of all, that there was an opportunity because the populace was weakened already. So in the Cultural Revolution, the population had been weakened by the Great Leap Forward, that had killed millions of people by that point. In the rise of the Third Reich, of course, the Versailles Treaty and the general, disruption in Germany around that time, the economic devastation that caused made people really be vulnerable. And of course, in COVID, we were vulnerable because of our apoplectic fear about this grave threat. So you need that as an ingredient to be manipulated. You need to be not secure in some fashion. There needs to be a weakness in the population, because, by the way, at the end of the day, the population is where the power is, right? That is where the power is. And we just need to kind of remember that a little bit more and try to strengthen each other in our communities in order to fight back against this stuff. So I drew those analogies, and I said, well, in all those cases, the people in authority then proposed some sort of massive sacrifice. In the case of the Cultural Revolution, it was to denigrate everything that was old, including maybe even killing old people, destroying temples, firebombing marketplace, shops and things like this. In the case of the rise of the Third Reich, it was you got to dehumanize some people, Jewish people, those with sympathies for communism, gay people, etc. In the case of COVID, we had the lockdowns, right? And we had the submission to all of these ridiculous policies that took away so many of our freedoms. And the narrative was, in each case, this sacrifice is required in order to help something that you love. In fact, that everybody loves. That is kind of an unarguably loved thing. In the case of the Cultural Revolution and Nazi Germany, it was kind of the fatherland or the motherland, right? The Middle Kingdom and the great fatherland of Germany. And everybody wants to support that, right? At some level, we all have this principle of, I want my nation to do well. And particularly if you're worried about the nation because you've been weakened and you've seen, weakening around you, which is the case in China and Germany at these times, people feel like the nation's suffering. We need to do something for the nation. In the case of COVID, there was this health threat, right? And so this notion that, the lockdowns are going to preserve health, and particularly the health of your grandmother and your grandfather and, the weaker parts of our population. Well, who doesn't love them, right? I mean, you're an idiot and kind of a jerk if you don't love those things, right? Your country and people, right? The people of your country and the health of those people. And we were sold this connection between the massive sacrifice and the welfare of something we loved by sleight of hand. We were sold that connection, and people just swallowed it whole because of their vulnerability. And so what I talk about in my TED Talk is how this essentially is a hijacking of our love mechanism. And it's incredibly ethically offensive, I find. You're taking, again, one of the most sacred things about people, which is our ability to love others and love things outside ourselves, which is where happiness comes from, by the way. We're talking about our happiness generation mechanisms. One of the pillars of how to be happy is to love, yeah? So you're grabbing that by the propaganda, and you're saying, well, if you do really have this love, you got to prove it by signing up to these sacrifices. So it's incredibly manipulative and so dark, right? And that happens over and over again. And I gave a few other examples in current culture where that happens. Like take the Me Too movement. If you love women, everybody loves women. I mean, they're half the human race. Of course we love women. But then the idea that, in order to prove your love to women, you have to denigrate men as being toxically masculine and, being sex predators and, basically being dangerous to women. Honestly, that sacrifice of thinking about men in that way and then acting that way in your own life is not going to help women. It's not, right? Just like lockdowns are not going to help the health of society. They're just not. And denigrating Jewish people is not going to help Germany. Germany ended up internationally humiliated from the Holocaust, of course. And in China, killing all the old people is not going to strengthen the country, right? These things they don't connect, actually, logically. But to see that, you have to be you have to be able to escape that propaganda. You got to escape that manipulation and do your own thinking. You have to think, hang on a minute. Does this connection I'm being sold really make sense from a scientific standpoint, from a rational standpoint? So you have to have access to that prefrontal cortex, like Roz was talking about, and you have to have some ability to think through the data that you're being exposed to and compare it to the way you already know the world works, which means you kind of have to have a model of the world in your head. And that's another aspect of vulnerability of today's world that we haven't really touched on. I think a lot of people today really don't understand how the world works. They're too busy worrying about stupid, petty things from social media or their own self-image or whatever. And they haven't bothered to really come to terms with the way people really are, the actual human nature we have, the way groups work, the way that, the dynamics of societies over time, the way institutions are structured, all these things that are super friggin' important, right? And we don't teach it in high school anymore. So no wonder that 18-year-olds have basically no idea really the world that they're living in. And so they have nothing to compare to. They're so manipulable. Any new data coming in, they just make up some story about, halfway house story about how maybe that could be because of X, and they leave it at that. They don't really think deeply. And so they don't have the tools oftentimes to do this to go through this process of escaping the manipulation and coming up with their own actual best guess at truth in a moment. Yeah, and that's the thing that helps us at the individual level, and at the community level, it helps us when we can talk about these things, talk about our best truth at the moment, and try to, as a community, get closer and closer to truth by combining multiple people's perspectives and all that. So I talk about that in the TEDx talk as well. So yes, I saw all of this in the COVID period, of course, and unfortunately TEDx saw fit not to publish my talk on their channel, but it has actually now garnered, I think, more views on Rumble than most of the approved TEDx talks have garnered.
So it's the bootleg.
Tucker out of Brownstone Institute for posting it there. Yeah.
You like the bootleg talks of Gigi Foster, like, the underground. Can I ask you, Gigi, and this is to Roz as well, and even to Paul, is there some evolutionary difference between us who didn't swallow the propaganda and those who did? Could there have been, I know, a little twing, because you can't pick it. I've interviewed people who collect trolleys for supermarkets. They didn't buy a cent of it. They were Australian, no Serbian, absolutely Aussie. And even on the spectrum, they bought it. I've interviewed professors like Gigi and others who didn't buy it. And then I've met others like Dr. Dan, who'll be on here probably smashing his head against the phone because all he's hearing is things that hurt his head. Is there a difference between us? Not to say we're better, but something that...
We're not. And I think that's a really... am I muted or can you hear me?
I mean, I don't want to suggest with the...
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece. We are not better, and there's too many people that are on their high horses.
No, different. I mean, different.
I know. But I think here's the thing. Humans are extraordinarily complex systems, like really from a systems dynamics point of view. And so trying to, again, people want to reduce it down. Why did they know? Is it this? Is it this? What causes it? There's so many factors that come in. Attachment is one that I talked about. There is, I believe, a genetic difference as well, but this conversation is a huge one, and maybe we can do this as a separate conversation. I mean, it's massive. Sure. But I just wanted to riff off a couple of things that Gigi said when she talked about that sort of propaganda that's targeting love. Going back to what I was saying before, that's why I really would like people to try and hold compassion for example, the mums that were at the school hassling the other mums that weren't vaccinating their children, because ultimately they were deliberately targeting. And you've got to remember that these nudge units have the best psychologists in there that know how we work. And so they're pushing all of the buttons that, operate unconsciously. And they know the love of mothers for their children is one of the most powerful forces in humanity. And that's what they were going for. So the mothers that were calling us anti-vaxxers and, thought we were crazy and wanted us jailed, they were doing that because they were the lionesses protecting their cubs. So really understanding that is key, because we need to bring down these divisions. It's not us and them, right? The vast majority of people are really, really good. They love their children. They love their families, but they've been manipulated. So I think that's a really, really key piece for people to take through all of this. It's not us versus them.
Just a thing though, I remember seeing Professor Sumner Miller when I was young, and he said, "Can you curl your tongue?" I don't know. I can do it that way. There, God, Gigi did it. And what he said was, if something happened and only the people who could curl their tongue could survive, then the others are gone. And what I'm saying is we've had $1 trillion propaganda machine smashing down on us. It was a Pearl Harbor COVID attack on our culture. In fact, they're now calling it cultural terrorism. And some people didn't buy it from the start.
Yes.
It just didn't work with them. And so I'm not saying we're better, but I just wondered if there's one little DNA trigger that's switched off that it just doesn't work on us, because some people, 20, 30% can't get hypnotized.
So there's multiple. Yeah, there's some of the serotonin and dopamine transporter genes that lead to what many people call high sensitivity. And this is a big topic. And if I go into it, might
Yeah, no worries.
take
No
the
worries. It was just
topic a bit. But
clarifying my
yes,
thought.
I think there definitely is a genetic susceptibility to basically make us the canaries, right? So in the same way that people who might have had an insecure attachment or exposure to trauma, their fire alarm is sort of scanning, it's more finely tuned, looking out for danger and a bit more sus to the government, for example.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Well,
genetically, there are canaries, right? As there are in all species.
yeah.
They're the ones that are sent down to the mine.
Yeah, Michael, maybe we just had the vaccination of prior bullshit. So we had a pre-exposure prophylaxis, you know, because we've been lied to before. And as you
Santa
said,
Claus? The whole world, I know it's a joke, but the whole world was lying to you. Your parents were lying to you. Everyone was lying to you. You had to wake up to that. Then the Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, you know. But anyway, let's get on to the infertility. When you were sitting at this round table, what was it like to be looking at the figures, and what were the figures you were seeing that this is why we're here tonight to talk about?
You want us to go into the actual figures? Gosh, so
or wherever it is. I mean, we've got to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, were we going to play the trailer? Were you going to show the trailer? Because they talk about some of the figures in that. That might be good.
Yeah, sure, I can do that if I can find it. Just keep chatting amongst yourselves.
This is
while you're finding that.
While you're looking for it, I would also say one of the problems, because Gigi was, making brilliant points before about taking stock and actually looking and thinking and understanding the world. I think one of the biggest problems we've got at the moment, and again, as parents, right, it's these bloody phones. So we, in our time, in our 50s, whatever we are, we'd sit at the bus stop and we'd be bored and we would, just think, and stuff would run through your brain. You'd go for a run and you would think. And it's we call it the diffuse mode of processing in psychology. And often that's when we have our sort of aha moments, all these back parts of our brain form neural networks, and things will come forward. But when you're on a bloody phone the whole time, or when you're running with your AirPods in, they literally never have that time for these different thoughts and, parts of their memory and processing to coalesce. It's a massive problem. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I would also just add, I think it's a broader conversation about why certain people were able to see through. As you said, Roz, it's not only just the insecure attachment. I think a lot of autistic people saw through. It's the need for social approval that some people have really strongly, and other people just aren't even aware of social rejection signals. And then, in some cases, I had been studying corruption and power and influence and love for 15 years before COVID came on the scene. So I was already primed intellectually to see these things, and I already didn't trust anybody with power, because you shouldn't. you just shouldn't. And it doesn't mean that my world comes crashing down because, oh my God, I can't trust anybody. Sure, I mean, I trust myself, and I trust a few people in this world. But even then, I know that they're sometimes going to let you down because they're human. Right? And you can't ever completely 100% trust really anybody, including yourself, because occasionally you're also going to not come through for yourself. So it's sort of a process of just letting go and being comfortable with that, just making your peace with that fact, right? And not looking for security in that place, because that is not where security is, right? So don't even try, right? You can build the institutions that you think will best support the development and maintenance of quality expertise in places that are important in the society, in different institutions and whatnot, but you're never going to get perfection on that score. You're never going to be able to completely trust any expert or person, and certainly not when they have power. So again, these are all things that we need to teach, and this is why I'm here at Academia Liberamentis, just to give a little plug. This academy is a new higher education experiment where we are trying to be honest about these things, about these facts in the world that we live in, and help people to figure out how their world works so that they can go back to their communities and better assist in the rebuilding of those communities strongly, without this, fear and looking to the government always to solve our problems, and taking more ownership of our own societies, more stewardship of the brilliant Western societies that we've come from, that, have created the best lives for people ever. But we've just sort of lost quite a lot over the last 30 years or so. And we need to restore some of that. So that's the whole genesis and nature of this institution. So it's, very, very nice to be here, because you get people who are able to disagree. We talked about whether or not the COVID vaccines killed people or saved people 2 days ago in class. And we had people in the room who believed, on opposite sides of the poll. Just like, as you're saying, Ross, my mom and dad used to, one was a lifelong Republican, one was a lifelong Democrat. They were married. They would cancel each other out at the polling booths every 4 years. And that was kind of a joke. It was a running joke, right? But we don't have those conversations anymore. Here we can have those conversations, or at least we can start. We can demonstrate and model how they work. You probably found the trailer by now, Michael.
Can I just say one?
Rather than playing the trailer, because we played the trailer all week to get people to watch the show. So I really think we've got to be here. I'm here to hear about the infertility crisis. I've watched the trailer, but I want to know what you mean. Are we looking at a 5%, 10%, 20%, 50%? What are we, when you say crisis, how big is this crisis? I know I'll just tell you things from the road. I remember Calbarry. I got calls from Calbarry to say they were having so many miscarriages, they couldn't get their head around it. I had a man in a tiny little town sit down with me and say, we had one stillbirth 10 years ago, and the last month they'd had 4. And then I had another guy whose wife was a midwife in the Sydney, one of the major Sydney hospitals, Children's Hospital, I think. And they said they were having crisis meetings about the amount of stillbirths, amount of missed abortions, the amount of children who are born with severe issues. And yet at these meetings, the one thing they would never bring up as they're trying to figure out what could be the problem, the one thing they would never mention was the jab, because you would get sacked. And so I just want to know before, because this is what everyone's come on here for, is to hear about this. I admire what you ladies done and all this stuff.
Michael,
But just where are we in this crisis before we play the trailer?
Okay.
I'll play the trailer, because really tonight we're here to. The trailer is only part of the whole roundtable, and the roundtable is these experts who have worked in the field and have faced censorship and cancellation for describing what they saw. Just like you're saying, you're giving reports from across the community, from the the funeral. So that's what the roundtable is. It's a report from people who have expertise, who have been cancelled for saying. So rather than us speaking for them, we want to encourage people to go and watch the roundtable. We'll play the teaser in case people haven't seen the promo, and then we'll have a bit more of a talk on what constitutes a crisis in fertility.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. I totally agree. And interestingly, and you guys are far more sort of social media savvy than I am, and certainly Gigi, who has nothing to do with it, and I would do the same if I could. The trailer is just under 4 minutes, and what we found, I learned a way to see on ACT, only 9% of people that view it have watched past a minute. So I think it would be good to see it.
Watch the 4 minutes.
We'll play the whole thing because it's really worth it. But I just want to make one quick comment on what you said before, Gigi, about the autistic community. Yes, there is a very overrepresented neurodiverse, whatever you want to, whatever sort of terms you use. But I don't see it because it's about fear or lack of fear of social exclusion. I see it because the neurodiverse community tend to be systems thinkers. And so we see tons of engineers, right? And so people who can see the whole system. And if you can see the whole system, you can see the moving parts. The vast majority of people, the 85%, tend to get stuck in paradigms. And it's that binary thinking. So just in case anyone in the comments has jumped onto that, I think it's...
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's a combination. I think, and depending on the person, of course, but I totally agree about the systems thinking. And my mom was a psychologist, my dad was an engineer, so there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad was an engineer too. All right.
Okay.
Are we going to the trailer now?
Miscarriage, infertility, neonatal harm. Reproductive experts worldwide are seeing the signals, but data isn't being tracked and questions aren't welcome. Bearing witness to the crisis unfolding, an international panel of leading reproductive medicine professionals are speaking out.
There has never been a time in the last 30 years of my career where they said that you could do something or give something to a pregnant woman that has no data.
We never give a pregnant woman anything new out of the gate, which is what diethylstilbestrol and thalidomide have taught us. You have two patients when you have a pregnant woman. You have the woman and you have the fetus.
Any new drug or vaccine, the first thing you have to do is work out the exact right dose, where it goes in the body, how long it lasts for, whether that's different for adults or children or in pregnancy.
These vaccines cause a non-specific systemic inflammatory reaction. In pregnancy, inflammation is the last thing you need.
I found the rejection of precautionary principle in relation to pregnancy incomprehensible.
There's literature now showing that, yes, this does not stay in the arm, but all the components of these injections go across the umbilical cord into the fetus.
In March 2022, they had another spike in neonatal deaths, which again followed the booster dose.
I was concerned about the proportion of immature oocytes and morphologically highly abnormal oocytes.
We learned not just with thalidomide, we learned that with valproate, multiple medications that women were given, and then babies were born with birth defects.
And the same applies, I'm afraid, to post-neonatal deaths as well. So these are later infant deaths between 1 month and 1 year.
Pfizer did start a randomized controlled trial. They had about 800 pregnant women enrolled. They were going to follow them up to 6 months. And they had to stop the trial and didn't publish the results because if they had had one more fetal anomaly or birth defect, that would have made that statistically significant. So they stopped the trial. So we don't have a long-term trial on pregnant women.
How is that possible? Why is it the case that the drug regulators would allow the manufacturer of the drug to cease the trial for self-serving reasons?
I would certainly argue that these injections would be considered in the old classification, a class X.
I would never, as a prenatal genetic counselor, recommend anything based on this information that's available.
If this is getting into the female fetus's ovaries, where all her eggs are produced by 22 weeks of gestation, she will not regenerate eggs. What does this mean with regards to the fertility of generations to come?
I wanted to know the vaccination status to see if there was a connection with the unexpected poor outcome, but the information was not provided.
It was specifically said that they would not look at the vaccine status of these women because it might increase vaccine hesitancy.
If you're a registered health professional in Australia, you can be deregistered if you question anything at all about any vaccine.
We should be allowed to ask for the data.
If you don't look at it, how can we fix it?
To add a field of the vaccination to this database would have taken 10 minutes. But their argument was, well, nobody asked them to.
People were fearful of what was happening. We didn't do our due diligence necessarily, but now we have time. It's not an emergency, and people should be able to go back and look at the data.
I would say in my entire career of seeing new vaccines coming in over decades, I've never seen anything like this.
Thalidomide taught us. We said never again. The health of our babies and future generations is everyone's responsibility. We call on the global reproductive health community to join this urgent conversation.
So there you have it, MJ. And it's about an hour and a half, the full roundtable. So these experts go into what they were seeing, and when Ros and I and Robert Brenton started the Lighthouse Declaration that nearly 2.5 years ago, I talked about excess deaths and threats to fertility. And even early on, we had warning signs. Long before this, we were having all these reports of menstrual abnormalities, and we were, there was the Rabbinical Council in New York where people like Dr. Zeb Zelenko, I think, and Robert Malone, I think, were testifying, and they were saying there was a real reason to think that just on the basis of the abnormality in the women were experiencing, that it was going to have an impact on fertility. What's more disturbing, perhaps, is the increased malformations. This, you said, is this a crisis? Well, if we gave you the numbers, we wouldn't be giving you these terribly. If you have a doubling of malformations or near doubling of miscarriages, that's already a thalidomide level event that we're dealing with, and it doesn't have to be 90% or 80% or 70%. And this is where the data is pointing now, to a very significant event of that's impacted on human fertility. I like the way that Professor Foster put it, unalive. There's a bit of a pandemic of unaliveness going on.
Yeah, and I mean,
a new word they use, unalive.
Just picking up on that, Paul, I mean, you can attack this question in multiple ways, right? And we should be allowed to do that, of course. And I wish we were having these conversations in the medical journals and indeed in the economics journals. But instead, we're having them in these sorts of channels and on Brownstone Institute's website and other websites of places that have been established since COVID to try to get non-mainstream views out there. What I did with Paul Freiders and Michael Baker on our latest blog for Brownstone is we looked at the global fertility losses basically from different studies, but also the global births, just births in the world, right? And you can see, you basically do a 10-year projection from, right before the COVID vaccines were released, and you say, okay, well, what should we have seen in terms of births? Yeah. And then you try to kind of triangulate, right, data from the studies that have specifically been done in particular regions with vaccinated or unvaccinated or whatever you can get your hands on. Do your best guess at estimating. You can walk through our analysis there and our logic, but we try to estimate what's the worst case scenario if, in fact, the departure from trend in a negative direction, of course, and also with the excess deaths, departure of trend is entirely due to these vaccines. What kind of numbers are we talking about, right? And of course, that's what we consider to be the most defensible, plausible worst case scenario based on our empirical analysis and as economists looking at, as you said, Roz, the big picture, not just one study or one country's bears data or whatever it is. So the whole world, what's going on with excess deaths and births. And, you see that the worst case is very bad. The worst case is this is the worst screw up that humans have ever done. Right, it's way worse than the Great Leap Forward, or
just here in the comments below, 8 stillbirths in hospital in WA in 2 months, normal stillbirths about 1 or 2 a year. We're hearing this, but I'm only hearing it from people, nurses. We had a paediatrician on here one night from Perth who's Iranian born, and he came on saying he was going to do a big revelation because he had so much to talk about. But when he came on the show, he just stayed there silent. He couldn't find the courage to actually speak. I think Lyndon, another doctor, is now working as a carpenter or installing blinds or something because they got rid of him. And this is the other terrifying thing. Here's a doctor willing to risk his career to say there's something dreadfully wrong here with fertility, and our system sacks him and gets rid of it. Yeah. I mean,
but I mean, you understand why this is happening, Michael, right? I mean, this is happening because people are maximizing something other than what you think they should be maximizing based on their titles and their professional positions, right? I always ask myself, what are you maximizing? When I'm looking at somebody's behavior, what are they trying to go for? What's their goal ultimately? And oftentimes they're not even consciously aware of it, as you say, Ross. Oftentimes they certainly wouldn't admit it, even if they were aware of it. But people maximize their ability to hold on to power, their own self-image. Yeah. And if you've been, think of yourself as, somebody in the mainstream who has given these vaccines to pregnant women yourself, given them perhaps to your own children, right? Perhaps to your, parents as well. You've directly, if you have to, take seriously our view of what might be happening here, based on our review of the data, anecdotal and global, right? From the micro up to the macro, if you take seriously our view at the moment, our best guess at what's going on, what you're talking about is that you were the agent of death.
Yeah, well, that's right.
have that information arrive. It's too dangerous.
It is, and this is why it's really important with the outreach that we're trying to do to this. And you were asking about numbers, Michael, and I wouldn't want to sort of go into it. The panel, as they will come on, will, but certainly we're talking about doubling of miscarriages, neonatal deaths, IVF anomalies, lots of placenta damages, lots of issues with the newborns that are there themselves, floppy babies.
It's in the comments. In the comments now they're saying it.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen the comments, but as you say, the levels of defenses of the professionals is enormous. And if you think about most of the medical profession, they have come into medicine through huge amounts, years, decades of hard work. They've given up a huge amount to get there. They've always been the cleverest kid in the class. Everyone sort of, always put them on a pedestal. And to turn around at this stage in the game and admit error is enormous. It's absolutely existentially enormous. And again, the problem we've got in our society, I think, is that there's this real inability, quite widespread, to just admit we're wrong. Oh shit. And that's the ability to admit wrongdoing is the most freeing thing you can do. And so what we're trying to do with all the stuff we do with Lighthouse, with the fertility piece, is not to point fingers, which a lot of the sort of freedom community are, and to call these doctors complicit or idiots or whatever, and is to try and highlight to them, you've been nudged, you've been manipulated, right? You were trying to do the best you could, but we need the best medical minds on board. We need you over here because we've got to sort this mess out, right? But with that, and we're sort of approaching this from a top-down, bottom-up, strategy, as it were. So top-down is we're trying to get the professionals to see what's going on. But it's quite incredible. And I think there might be some North Group people on here. There's been a lot of work to try and send out long letters to huge groups of OBGYNs, etc. And they just don't look. It's too much for them. But I think really the power is going to come from the people. It's going to come from when there's enough pressure from underneath. And what we're doing is we're going to create template letters people can take to their doctors, to different types of fertility specialists. We're going to do printables with QR codes that people can print off and sort of put around the place. But I think this is the public that ultimately will be the force that puts the pressure on the doctors and the fertility specialists to take note.
There's a guy called Constantine in England, an intellectual guy. He's from Russia originally. And he talked about how after Stalin died and the real information about the gulags and everything came out, they had mass suicides because once the people left a gulag, they didn't return home to Moscow. They stayed in local towns, and with them, the guards stayed as well. And when the guards found out the truth, they couldn't handle it. And the reason I'm talking about this is Dr. Dan has said here, how hard would it be for Paul, Michael, you can spell my name correctly, Doc, and Gigi to admit the vaccine is safe? Well, the thing is, if the vaccine is safe and we're wrong, we look like fools and we just get on with our lives. It's no issue. If you're wrong, then the next generation of girls, or a huge percentage of the next generation of young girls and young boys, are infertile. And you won't even look. You won't even look down. You're like, no, you can't be wrong. You're absolutely bang on. Where in actual fact, because I know you vaccinated your own children, you need to actually stand back and have the courage to verify, because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people just get dismissed. And that's what I found with my work, interviewing vaccine injured people. They just get dismissed. The one the other day, a woman that killed herself, she had tinnitus, or that ringing in the ears. Every doctor dismissed her. She ended up in a mental home. She was pro-jab, pro-everything, got all her family jabbed. In the end, she found she was too much of a burden. She took her own life. I interviewed a mother.
Can I just pick up on two things in there, Michael? So one thing is, I think it's very important to admit and say and acknowledge that, yes, every one of us here has taken public stands about certain things that bias us from the perspective of, standard source analysis. So if I say the lockdowns were a bad idea, yeah, you should discount what I'm saying because I have an ego-related reason to say that because I'm on public record saying how bad they were. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't at least consider that the possibility that might be true, but you just don't take me at my, as like the only source you're going to look at. You want to find people who are not so public in their, statements about this in 2020, 2021, et cetera, to do independent analyses, right? I should not be the person in charge of doing the, COVID policy retrospective for the Australian government because I'm pre-motivated, right, to find that the lockdowns were bad. Even as a scientist, I have to recognize that's true as much as I try to be objective. So it is what that person said was very true. And there is a motivation there. And we would feel like, oops, there's egg on my face. Okay. And, you can say, well, we're so great and we wouldn't be so bothered by that. But everybody's human. We would be a bit bothered by it. But I like to think that we would take it on the chin and say, well, thank goodness, because that means millions of people aren't dying from these things, right? And that's a great win. Like, I would love to be wrong about this. As it says in the title of this series, I hope we are wrong, really desperately hope we're wrong. I hope that the human body figures out ways to clear this stuff, whatever this stuff is, right? Before the girls who are in utero to the vaccinated mothers become, of fertile age themselves. I hope we work out detox mechanisms. I hope we work out all sorts of things, therapies people can do. And there are some doctors working on that, thank goodness. We hope we push it out to as many people as possible. I hope for all these things, and I'm optimistic. I believe in the infinite potential of human creativity. I think if we could focus on that problem, then we would have a good chance of actually stemming the tide of some of these.
Gigi, Dr. Dan, the Vaxophile, he would know as a cardiologist that you have these when you look at risks, they have a matrix, and when you've got outcomes which are particularly severe, say a threat to the species or a threat to reproduction, with a large number of people. Even if the odds are tiny, it deserves an extraordinary amount of attention. And something which is mild and self-limiting, then you don't give that the same SAC score, severity assessment score. He knows all that, and he must be aware that what we're talking about is extremely serious, and that the odds don't. And what I wanted to ask is about the data, because of course all of these things could be answered if the appropriate people were forthcoming with fertility. Privacy can be done. Well, you can give de-identified data, but instead, what we've been facing are studies looking at this that are a nightmare to understand, that are making all sorts of assumptions. And then when you say, hang on, this data claiming safety, we look at this data because it doesn't add up. And then they've not been very forthcoming, have they?
Well, so this is a really interesting question, Paul, and it's something that in Australia is actually kind of an endemic problem. Data sharing has conventionally, for the last 20 years or 30 years that I've been working as an academic in Australia, it has not been good. It has not been world class. A lot of the data on people in Australia that is held by government agencies, the Australian Bureau of Statistics or other Canberra agencies, is not well managed and shared with the community as a whole. And there's this notion, there's this sort of general belief in the fact that somehow if we share data, then we are compromising people's privacy, right? This confidentiality thing. But that is used as a fig leaf to cover up non-sharing of data, which enables, if we were actually able to get those data, we would know a lot more about what's going on in Australia. And we'd know it from a diverse set of sources. We'd actually have the ability to have an informed conversation across different methods and analysis techniques and perspectives and previous knowledge, using the data. And we could actually make some progress on better understanding what's happening in our country. And this latest thing with the COVID, vaccine and, connection with morbidity and mortality stuff is just the most recent example of this. There's all sorts of, blah, blah, blah about confidentiality. There are ways to anonymize data. I used to work in the United States I worked at the Census Bureau. Yeah, there were some confidential records, but there's ways to deal with that. And you know, particularly when you're dealing with really large data sets, you don't say Joe Smith had this, you know, obviously there's, I mean, technology has gone beyond, you know, the concern that is constantly brought out that somehow if we look at the data, we're immediately imperiling the privacy of everybody. That's just not true. So I just think we need to believe in the ability of really the frontier data management technology to effectively blind and protect people's privacy when we look at these kinds of individual level data, and charge ahead and bloody well look at those data and let other people look at it too, not just have it be the province of specialty approved people in some department somewhere, but have researchers around Australia and even I would say, you know, potentially people who are outside the research you know, fields, able to at least look at some snatches of the data or some of the summaries or something, because, you know, why are we keeping information that is so potentially critical to our country away from the people? Like that's nuts. That is really just a bad idea.
It's not just the country, it's the globe. And I saw Joanna just said, you know, why would you hide data if you didn't have to cover your ass? Absolutely. And the roundtable, they talk about this a lot. And Paul and Gigi, you might want to talk about the Shimbukuru sort of cover up that's gone on recently. You'll see in the roundtable, you heard a bit in the trailer, but at every point, every one of those professionals, all they wanted was to be able to share the data with their colleagues. They're not there saying, this is happening, definitely, definitely. They're saying we have major signals of harms around the world in these different areas. We have to look at them. But the data is being blocked, stopped at every step of the way. And the few bits of data that have come out, Paul, do you want to talk about what's happened with
Before you go there, I just had a question to Gigi about data. Surely births is very hard to hide, though, because births have to be registered.
Yes,
and
indeed.
deaths have to be registered. So surely the basic fundamental data would be available, wouldn't it?
That's exactly why we use those sources from the world data on births and excess and deaths to try to do our analysis, right? And that's what we used in the Brownstone article. We didn't use anything else. We also drew on some studies who themselves had used, VAERS and had done other kinds of A/B trials and whatnot in different countries around the world. But our basic analysis technique was to look at those world data. I'll give you the link, but if people just go to brownstone.org and look for Into the Abyss, that's the title, first part of the title of it. But that's exactly right. And that's why I wanted to wait until we had that kind of track, a long enough time period, long enough period of data recorded that we could actually start saying something and comparing what we've seen to trend and actually, have a reasonable sample size of years after the release before we start going public with, our throwing the gauntlet down, here's our best guess on both the deaths and the fertility stuff.
The thing with the live births, if you're just looking at the live birth rate from Bureau of Statistics, etc., you've got to take into account all of the different psychological and sociological factors that were at play during COVID. Yeah, a lot of people have turned around and said, I don't want to have babies. There's been so many different pieces, confounds, right, in that data. The piece in Fiona Marlowe, when she comes on in this series, she's a midwife. What she's been trying to do for the last many years is she always looks at the, the neonatal death statistics that come out from the ABS. And they used to come out every year at the same amount, at the same date. And I think it was in 2021, no surprise. Suddenly they stopped publishing these statistics. Yeah, so she'll talk about that. All of the panel will talk about it. But at every turn, there's just been smoke and mirrors. And so it's really hard to get a picture. And so a lot of people say, well, there's no, and again, they talk about this, where's the RCT, where's the randomized control trial? And again, Gigi, you can speak about this, but that's not the way science works, right? You've got to start off with looking at anecdotes and signals of harm all over the place. And if there are enough of them, then we need to bring the research in. But if everyone's pretending it's not happening and hiding the data, how can we do that?
No, that's very true. And just in terms of what's going on in academia, again, I will say that it's not just COVID. I mean, there's been what we call the replicability crisis going on in psychology and economics for years pre-COVID, which is basically just showing you that people have a motivated incentive, ego motivated, to hide things or, finagle things in their own data if it suits their purposes to get published, essentially. And so we have these phrases now like P hacking and, weird phrases that essentially are about how do you manipulate data and statistical analysis in order to suit your own agenda. There's a reason why we say lies, damn lies, and statistics. It's legitimate. Being, somebody who did a lot of econometrics in my early career and certainly still teaches statistics and all these things. You can say a lot with statistics that's not true. Now, you can also say a lot with statistics that is our best guess at truth, but you have to be, you have to follow particular protocols and, be aware of your own weaknesses and your own biases. And you have to have other people, ideally, checking what you've done who are not in your, camp. So adversarial collaborations are one way that we've tried to ameliorate the problem of P hacking and other kinds of problems with replicability, where you can't replicate somebody's study because, maybe there was some data problem. So it's not a new thing, okay, in science. So again, it's not like I came into COVID thinking that all scientists were experts we could trust with our, lives and livelihood. No, no. If they have power and status, they're going to fight for that and they're going to be motivated to keep it. And so that means that even if they say, well, I'm an objective scientist and blah, 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 they may try. I certainly try, but, we're all human and there are these other motivations going on. And part of accepting humanity is accepting that that's the way we operate. That's just how we are. And it doesn't mean we're bad. It doesn't mean we're sinful. It doesn't mean we're, we can't do anything or nobody can ever be trusted to do anything. You just have to understand the incentives involved, speaking as an economist.
Yeah,
right?
I get what you're saying, but I just think that the survival instinct would override. This is what got me with COVID. The person's own survival instinct would override everything else. Just like you said, fight or flight.
No,
And
because
no, I get it. But this is children now. It's like 5 years. The propaganda thing is finished. Here we are. We have pediatricians, and we know, like we said, we had one on. We got a question here from the talking about Dr. McClendon. He's now building sheds because he released the data. Here we have a crisis of a moral crisis for pediatricians who must be seeing this. At some point, there has to be a level where it's almost like that thing I did about the 10th bird. There's finally one death of a baby or a miscarriage. They go, I can't take this anymore. I have to speak out. This is, it's quite terrifying, especially as we've all got children.
This, I think, Michael, comes back to what you were asking before about an inherent difference between those of us that see and those of us that don't. I think it's more about those of us that speak up and those of us that don't. There's plenty of people, plenty of professionals that know what's going on, but they are either too terrified of losing their job, their status, they've got huge student debts, all of those kinds of things. But there is the split, I believe, the genetic split tends to be that there's about 15%, again, who are canaries, right? Who will go out, see things, systems thinkers, see the field, and who will speak up. The other 85% follow the herd, right? And there's been a huge amount of research. And, again, it's a huge topic, but there's been this sort of grouping of different scientists about 15 years ago who all came across the same thing. And some were working with bats, some were working with mosquitoes, some were working with humans. And they all came across the same sort of scientific fact that there's this split, about 15 to 85% of all of the species up and down the phylogenetic scale. You have those who are the canaries, highly sensitives, I call them, and those who follow the pack. And the really important thing is, and this is what stops and blocks so many people, is because people talk about critical thinking. You see if you're a critical thinker. I'm smart, therefore what I think is the truth. But there's plenty of rocket scientists and emeritus professors in, I don't know, quantum whatever, who have no idea, right? So you can be a really critical thinker in your field, but it doesn't mean you see the system, right? Those critical thinkers, I don't know, there's this whole sort of philosophy of science, Kuhnian paradigm change. I don't want to delve into that, but But people, there's a lot of, and Gigi, I'm sure you work with a lot of them, there's a lot of very high-ranking academics who would literally die before they're proven wrong. You know, it's happened throughout history.
Oh yeah, no, I mean this. I love your Inuit analogy, because it's very much the case. I remember saying, 4 years ago or whatever, clearly some people would literally rather die in a ditch than be rejected by their group, lose their group acceptance. It's just so clear now to me, right? It wasn't as clear before COVID. I mean, I knew that group pressure was important, and in fact, I've studied group influence for my entire career because it's fascinating to me, because I don't feel it as much, right? So for me, it's like, wow, why is this such a big deal for people, But it really is, right? For most people, it's a huge thing, and it is literally just it's a suicide risk scenario if they were to be rejected. And I want to go back to what Michael Breger-Cook was saying about the suicides. I remember saying early on in 2021 to my son, actually, in mid 2021, when we were talking about the vaccine, and I told him, look, it's your choice, but what I'm worried about is where are we going to get all the hearts? If this happens, if this goes everywhere, where are we going to get all the hearts? There's going to be pigs. Where are we going to get them? Right. And we're now seeing these heart transplants. What I was worried about a year after that was, okay, how are we going to deal with all the suicides of the medical people and others who were complicit in this? And once they realize, right? Once they wake up. And I am desperately worried about that. And that's another reason why I feel it's that Roz's approach, and we try to take this approach in Australians for Science and Freedom as well, of compassion, tolerance, acceptance, love-based reaching out to people who have been on that other side is so crucial, because we can still save lives. We can save their lives potentially, because there is that huge risk. It's just because it's thinking about yourself as not having been had, of course, but also having been the direct agent of death. That is just too shocking for most people, on top of having to deal with the crashing down of their whole way they thought about the world previously. It's just too much of a shock. And I can totally imagine a spate of suicides about this. And I would like to, do what we can to prevent that.
That's always been my big concern as well. If you look back to the sort of 2007, 2008 Wall Street crash, and there were, what are they called? Derivative equity specialists jumping off buildings, right, in Wall Street, because so many in the medical professional, their entire self-concept is built on their intelligence, right, and being right and leading the group, etc., etc. And so the existential, the shame component of this is potentially so huge, and we can't afford to lose them, let alone from a human level. We don't want to. And so really, I think a huge part, and I'm not religious, as you guys all know, but I think there's so many things in the Bible. Let he who be without sin, right? All of those pieces. We've all done stupid things. We've all done things we've regretted. And I think that ability to just be human and own your mistakes and go, okay, all right, shit, but let's get together. And that's what we're trying to do. Let's get the best brains together, because we've got to sort this out. Stop fighting, stop pretending it's not happening. Let's get together and save our babies.
It doesn't even matter if it's not the vaccine that's causing it. If the data is right and we're having missed abortions and whatever the reason, we have to find it. All I know is from the conversations I've heard in hospitals, they're not allowed to even bring up the vaccine, where it naturally, from critical thinking point of view, it has to be on the table, because suddenly everyone got vaccinated and suddenly we're seeing these results. So it might just be coincidence, because there's a lot of those around, but we have to have those. I have to say, in defense of the tribe that I'm in, though, there is a proportion that rant and rave at the other side, but there's also a huge amount of compassion. I mean, the forest of the fallen is planted by the unvaccinated, and we don't push anything. We just leave it there, and we're not in that. The only person of that who is in that is Dazzle, who was one of ours. And the rest is other people, and we are honoring that. So and I interview a lot of vaccinated people now. Like last night at a dinner, one guy who's had 3 jabs told me, it's going to kill me. I know it. I can feel it in me. It's already taken out his mother. It's already taken out his friend. And he was my age, and he's just like resigned to it. I don't sit there calling him an idiot. And I'm like the Hoodie gang, the Johnny Latta gang. The only thing I think our side really feels, because all of us are dealing with huge amounts of death or mentions of death, is grief. I grieve for them. I grieve for my country. I grieve for my people who have been conned. And like Gigi said, they used love. I remember my friend Damien Richardson said it's a war on love in the first few days of the fights. And yesterday I was staying with a girl called Tracy, who's a florist, and she said never in her history of being a florist has she had to do so many sympathy cards. She does them all day. Young people, it's just non-stop. She said she's never seen this amount of numbers. So there's other places to get the data from, you know. Even a funeral director spoke to me in a town, a tiny little town, and they've been the funeral directors there for 50 years. She's taken over from her father. And she said they've never seen so many deaths. They've never been so busy. And the youngest was a 2-day-old baby who just died. You know, I'm not sure, you know what, but I asked, did the mother question it? Did anyone question? Did any of these excess funerals, did anyone parishioner even whisper that it could be the jab? And they didn't. They just bury him and get on with their lives. And she took it to have a part-time job in IGA. And that's her first child. So we're just I call it the weeping years. And this is where we are. And we have a right, we have a duty, actually, to question what is going on. We're a first world country. We've got one of the best health systems in the world, and all these people are sick and dying. Yeah. I mean, there is something dreadfully, dreadfully, dreadfully wrong. You know?
On the point about the health system, Michael, I mean, I'm not sure that I would say we have one of the world's best health systems. We certainly have one of the most. I mean, this is
more experience than you.
Yeah, well, it is an active, area, right?
I was in 4 hospitals. Let me explain myself. What I saw in these 4 hospitals was people who don't even know we exist. All these doctors, nurses, they don't know there's even a resistance. They don't even know there's a need for a resistance. None of them. I didn't find one who was aware that there was a resistance. But what I found was people who were in the trench with me trying to save my life, from the cleaners to the surgeons in all the 4 hospitals, really beautiful, wonderful people. And then I realized the algorithms are protecting them from our stuff. They don't see it. And that's why I came out of hospital saying, this is why we came up with this B thing, is if we don't have an active visual presence in society, like the woke do, like the LGBT do, like the Amish do, like the Sikhs do, if we don't have a presence, then we're just entertaining ourselves in our little echo chamber. So that's what I was suggesting.
So Michael,
this documentary should go town to town halls, like Albie Mangle.
Should we talk about how it's been censored? Do you guys want to share what happened a couple of weeks ago?
Sure.
When I tried to email you.
Yeah, it's hard to share this stuff when you can't even email between accounts to the people that are meant to be sharing it. You know, it said like, this is spam. This is dangerous. Do not. Yeah. And believe it or not, Roz has emailed me before.
Hundreds of times, right? Yeah.
And so this is really this is really being sat on. So you're saying we need the people who are watching to know about lighthousedeclaration.org. It's there. People have to share it. People have to share it. So look, one thing, follow the incentives, Charlie Munger said, and I'll give you the outcome. Well, I'll tell you that the people who have been cancelled, who lost their jobs, who followed their conscience and their oaths, must be 99.9% of them have gone backwards, financially. They haven't benefited. If you're saying the incentive is income and grift, that is, we know from experience that's a total lie. So we're only doing it because we care about humanity and we care about the truth and we care about the babies, And Michael, I spent decades doing obstetric anesthesia. So when I read these reports of malformations or lost babies or stillbirths or neonatal deaths, to me, I see each tragedy. It's like I've lived through it already in so many cases in the past, and this is why we talk. There's no other reason, and I'm afraid that there's a lot of people. There's a big vested interest on the other side to prevent this message from getting out. So, yeah, if you're listening, know about the Lighthouse Declaration. Go over. You don't have to be a doctor, healthcare worker to sign the declaration, and share the roundtable, because frankly, we need help. We need help getting it out, because it is so hard, so heavily censored. And we were going to talk a bit about Shimbakuru and a bit more about data. Gigi, do you have any comments about?
I'm happy to talk about that a little bit if people want to. I would say that in terms of incentives, just picking up on what you said before, I think most of the doctors that Michael will have encountered at the coalface in his encounters with the healthcare system would also have that great feeling. I mean, that's what motivates them too, right? They want to save lives. So on this point, most people are aligned, right? On the principle of saving lives and not having babies die, right? Most people are aligned. The problems are not there, actually, right? It's not that anybody wants babies to die, right? Generally speaking. Now, there will be a few psychopathic and sociopathic, maniacs in various positions, and there will be people who are capable of huge amounts of self-delusion, such that they just don't allow themselves to see the possible lethal consequences of their actions. But if they are coming face to face with a dead baby, most people will say this is a bad thing and I wish this wouldn't have happened, right? So that's something we're all aligned on. And there are other incentives at play for everybody. I mean, Paul, you had this wonderful experience being able to get yourself underegistered through your own actions in the legal space, and I know that makes you proud, and it should make you proud, and something that is a different kind of motivation than just caring about life, but it's completely normal human motivation. I have a motivation to basically be a professional economist that people respect, right? I mean, of course, that's something that's important to me, and so I try to work towards that reputation. So I think we shouldn't pretend that we're somehow the completely perfect people in some sense of always only wanting the good or whatever. Everybody at some level wants the good. It's just we also have other incentives, and you should just watch out for what incentives the person you're listening to or the person who published a paper or wrote a paper actually has. Now, going to the Shimbakuro thing. So this article was published, and essentially there was a possibility of mistakenly deriving from this particular academic article the conclusion that the data being used showed that there was an 81 or 82% miscarriage rate in this Pfizer trial, I believe. The problem was that was including all of the women who sort of got the vaccine a lot later in pregnancy than they would normally have, a miscarriage, so in the second or third trimester. And so those, that's kind of not the appropriate denominator to use, right? And so there was this kind of confusion about that, and there was a contingent in the resistance community that essentially was then going off on this tangent saying, well, maybe that whole, maybe the whole article itself or the particular interpretation that gave us this 81 or 82% miscarriage rate, which was wrong, was because of the desire to poison the well, to put out such a fantastical number that anything then that was further said on the point of miscarriages was going to be disputed by the mainstream as well, just more of that wacky miscarriage stuff, right? And so basically to prevent the real data or the real, more realistic analyses from being heard by the mainstream. And, maybe that's true. It's possible. I can certainly see the incentives there that would line up with that. But the point being, first of all, every article is written, at the edge of our understanding and our sort of ability to interpret data, and mistakes are possible. Published mistakes are possible. There are plenty of them out there. I mean, my goodness, don't even get me started.
Especially when the studies are constructed in such a way to be particularly obtuse and convoluted, and
which is most studies these days, to be honest with you, Paul. People write papers in an obfuscatory way in order to hide the potential weaknesses in their analyses. I mean, this is one of the ways that people maintain their professional reputations, sadly. They publish these things and try to make it difficult to understand what they did so that they just seem smart, and everybody's like, ooh, you're so great, right? This is one of the reasons I don't try to publish in the really top elite journals anymore, because it's all about that. It's all this face game, and it's not really about science anymore. So that's normal, okay? But that's something that definitely happened, and now the responsibility of the rest of our movement, I think, and the scientific profession generally, is just to do the best we can to see what other data sources are out there and see whether this triangulates properly with other studies and other results. And when you do that kind of analysis, which is again part of what we did in the Brownstone piece, you find that this 82% miscarriage rate is really kind of way out there. It's an extreme outlier, and it shows that, okay, yeah, that's probably not the right number. And if you look at the data in the paper, you can see that. But you don't just stop looking at miscarriages, right? You just keep saying, okay, wait a minute, maybe there, could we adjust this? What would it be if we use the right denominator? What do the other studies say? Because it's such an important area. And of course, we go through this in the roundtable, and the speakers talk about what they've observed, which is more like a doubling of various types of negative events.
If it was 82, like I remember at first when I took on this suggestion of 82%, I was looking around me, Michael, and thinking, and I remember crying, thinking, I'm not going to see any babies soon. All the babies, but then the babies kept coming.
Yeah.
But, and that's a bit like we were being told that everyone was going to drop dead from COVID, and then nothing happened. But it doesn't mean that nothing happened. There was miscarriages, there was stillbirths, and there were malformations, but which is very, very serious. And it didn't. But this well poisoning was 82%. So then when someone comes along and says, it's 15, 16%, but it was meant to be 6, or 8, then you go, is that all?
Yeah.
But that's you're giving this to millions upon millions, billions of healthy people. This is so. Yeah.
I think the really important piece with that Shimbakura article as well is that most of the government recommendations for vaccination of pregnant women were based on this one study that came out of the CDC. And what's happened recently, and Dr. Kimberly Biss, when she comes on, hopefully next week, possibly the one after that, she'll talk about this, was that when the pressure has been put onto this study, so just at the end of last year, Senator Ron Johnson, who most of, I'm sure you've heard of, asked to see this data. A couple of weeks later, they found there was this mass deletion event of all of this researcher's emails. All of them just disappeared. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. And so at the start of this year, Senate then subpoenaed all of the data in these emails, but they've turned around and said, there's nothing here now. And I mean, I'm sure Gigi has a lot to say on this, but, in my very short research career, I know that you are absolutely, have to sign a million things saying not only will you keep paper data in locked cupboards, but you will have this electronic data in form X, and you will have backup form Z. But in this critically important piece that has driven policy around the world, it's all gone.
Yeah, I mean, the data retention protocols actually, funnily enough, change with the fashions of human ethics research. We have a national statement on research in human subjects, which is actually quite a beautiful document. It's a very good national statement in Australia, and other Western nations have similar things. What happens is that document gets interpreted differently at different institutions, and typically there is a higher level of scrutiny, and I would say scrutiny that doesn't actually further protect human subjects that is in place at many institutions. So we have ethics boards, which are kind of like potted plant committees, which essentially need to justify their existence, and there's lots of bureaucratic incentives at play there. And so you end up with these massively long forms, 40 pages or something, just in order to ask people some questions. You're not injecting anybody's eyeballs with heroin or anything. You're just asking them questions like about their income or something, right? And it becomes a huge, huge compliance burden for researchers, which number one stops research. I mean, I haven't applied for ethics approval for a human subjects research project because I haven't done any such direct research projects for a long, long time now, because I've been doing a lot of COVID stuff. I've been writing book chapters and whatnot, but I haven't been doing direct research with subjects because it's too much of a pain bureaucratically, right? It's just too much of a pain. So you're stopping research and you're not protecting human subjects. You're actually directing work and attention to other parts of the study, like, oh, is it 7 years or 5 years that I must keep my data? And it literally changes from year to year. And how exactly are you supposed to keep the data? Well, depending on the technology and the servers that they have at the university, because they just upgraded them. Okay, now we're supposed to put them in this folder or that. It's a morass of rules and regulations that doesn't really connect with the safety of human subjects, which is, of course, the important thing here, right? As well as supporting quality research and getting enough research so that we actually know what's going on in our world, right? And I think this is one of the reasons, by the way, that people have not yet done the kind of analysis at the individual level, unit record level, that they could do now with the data that the AIHW has, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, on morbidity, mortality, and vaccination status. That data is there. And I'm going to be applying for it to study the effects of lockdowns, which of course is my big thing. But there's also vac status and there's all sorts of other things. But there are huge administrative hurdles to getting that data. And you can only get it. You can even only apply if you're in certain institutions, right, that have been sort of pre-vetted. So it's this massively elitist system, and it doesn't really effectively protect human subjects. What it does is protect people in power and prevents us from knowing about our country and our people. So, those data management protocols, they fluctuate, and basically, you need to keep the data in most cases. But in the case of the Shimba case, it was not just data that was deleted; it was also communications. It was a lot of like emails and other kinds of Slack posts and all these things, and that was basically obfuscatory, because that then allows us to not know anything about what was going on. I mean, it keeps us in the dark about what was happening in relation to the communication about the data, which is almost more important than the data itself.
And it gets worse, Michael, because we've seen flat out fabricated data and AI generated data. I saw that first in Surgisphere, in the Lancet of all places. That was the study that they used to stop all the research on hydroxychloroquine. They said, dangerous because of this. And it turned out to be completely fraudulent, completely made up. So we're dealing, when you're talking about data, we really demand the real record level data, de-identified is fine, and let real independent people who understand how to look at the data come to their own conclusions. And I think the stakes can't be any higher. So why can't they? This is what I think people should be asking for. Put it out there, but you notice it's the exact opposite. And this Shimba Kuru, it was relied upon to say, oh, we can give this this injection to pregnant women, and now he's basically deleted all his communications, and I don't know if he's gone into hiding, but he's not in his office anymore. Apparently, someone else is, and no one knows where he's gone. So I don't know. We just want the data, and those who are reporting their observations, people who have been attacked and censored, they have data too, and that message is being blocked, and it should be part of the discourse. I got in trouble because of talking also about early treatment, and that was getting way back to your earlier piece, Ros, about the fear. They had us in fear, and I thought, well, once people realize that we can keep you out of hospital Just take early treatment. We've got this sorted. And, you know, the prevention of fear was such a terrible thing I was doing, you know. But I was affronted by the fear porn, especially knowing that you could do anything. And look, I just think it's lovely having you at the cafe, you know, being one of the co-founders of the Lighthouse Declaration, and, you know, to have you on home turf, Roz, is wonderful, and Gigi, wonderful to have you here.
Look at this comment. This is what I think. We always talk of data. Look, just look out your window. No babies around, and I've been living on the road now for a while, and I'm telling you, when you see a brand new baby, it's an event, because you're going, oh my God. You know, if you're in a bar, like we eat in bars or something, and someone brings in a brand new baby, it really is a rare occurrence now.
Yeah.
So surely there's even things from people selling prams, people selling maternity gear. Surely there'd be other ways the data would be shown. You know?
That's the sort of stuff that we've been doing for 4 or 5 years now. You have to look out of the corner of your eye at you know, the sale of small coffin sizes in Canada. You know, actuarial reports, because the official data and the real stuff has not been made available. But we're getting a clear picture now, I think, as Gigi said earlier, that we've got enough data now that it's starting to resolve what the true situation is, and that is plenty bad enough. You don't have to invoke the 82% sudden drop in fertility to have all the alarm bells ringing, and to demand that you guys share this roundtable, because that's
download it, actually. Download it and repost it, because if you share it, I'm telling you, it goes nowhere. Because you check, Brady Gunn's a perfect example. He does these rants. He can get up to 900 shares. And if you look at every share, no one's reshared it, no one's liked it. So when you share it, you feel like, oh, look, someone shared my stuff, I'm reaching out. And the person who shared it feels like they're doing something, but it's a trick. It goes nowhere. You might as well put it in a dustbin. What you need to do, and there's plenty of apps to do it, they're really cheap, some are free, download it, repost it. Because in the algorithms think it's a brand new post, and play it to far more of your followers. So you have a 10-fold increase if you download it and repost it. You know.
Can I also ask quickly, because as Paul said before, we do need help. We need help sharing this message. We are being blocked at every turn. And in terms of practical things you can do, please go and sign the Lighthouse Declaration. And when you do that, then we will be in communication with you, and we will be sharing in the coming weeks these letter templates that I've mentioned that can be taken to different fertility specialists and doctors, and also discussion points, how we can have discussions. You know, for a lot of people, it's grandparents. How do we speak to our children who are, you know, looking to get pregnant themselves? And that's a really, really sensitive piece. Also, if you can, please follow us on socials, but don't just follow us. If you can, in X, there's a notify button, and in Facebook, there's probably something similar, because we are completely shadow banned, which means even though we put posts on, for the vast majority of people, unless you actually go to our sort of home profile, you won't see them. So please do that. We will be distributing printables to those that have signed the declaration that'll have QR codes on them. But it really, I think this is like a war of attrition, that we just have to keep getting this out there from the public. We're going, you know, we've got all sorts of other initiatives that we're trying to get in touch with the professionals with, but they're a really tricky bunch, because we're 4 years on, and as we've spoken about at different levels, they are psychologically defended. They are, you know, they have all these different defenses up, and so getting to them is harder. But the people that can get to them is the public. The public put pressure on and start asking the questions of these professionals, then they can come to the party. And then we've got the two sort of forces, the top down from the professionals and the public, all putting this pressure on, demanding of the government that we look at this as a matter of urgency. That's what we need to do. We've just got to really, really push.
Can I say two quick, brief things? Michael? Yeah, I wanted to address that. So the first thing, and then that's the second thing I'm gonna say on that topic. The first thing is essentially just if you want to hear more from Roz, it's a plug for an event that's coming up in Sydney on the 10th of September. So Australians for Science and Freedom are showing the documentary film called COVID Collateral at Hoyt Cinema in Moore Park. And so you can go to our website, scienceandfreedom.org, go to events, and you can see it's called Bring a Friend Movie Night. So Roz and I and Robin Cosford, whom some of you may know already, and Raphael Lataster, whom you may also know, we're going to be doing a Q&A panel at the end of the screening. So you'll be able to bring a friend to the screening, hopefully a friend who's questioning things, a little on the fence. So we're trying to reach outside the echo chamber to get people who are a little unsure. Maybe, you've shared something about this stuff with them and they're kind of wondering, well, what's actually going on? The film is very tame by resistant standards. It's got Jay Bhattacharya, Scott Atlas, of the people, the regulars that you'll know, but they're very much talking about just science and, their own experiences during this period. And there's, it's quite tame, as I say. So I think it's a good experience to give to someone who's on the fence. And it's also perfectly fine for children to come along. We've had that question. So please do. It's the 10th of September in Sydney. I think it's a Wednesday night, movie night at 6:00. So please pass the word about that. Second thing I'll say is, yes, in relation to the infertility problem, when we wrote our brownstone piece, we were intentionally trying to get the worst case estimate. What could be due to these vaccines in the worst possible case? There are, of course, many other possible causes of the reduction in fertility, right? And even the excess deaths, such as delayed effects of lockdowns, things like missed cancer screenings, things like that. The fact that men and women have been divided from each other via propaganda and just nonsense and idiocy, when that is the most important partnership we've got, actually, between men and women in this world to keep our society moving forward effectively. And so they kind of delay partnership. They also don't know how to interact with each other, people in their 20s often, because they've been home because of COVID, and they just sort of missed a lot of normal socialization practices and good habit development. And so now they're more addicted to their phones, or more addicted to their video games, to porn, whatever. And so they're not really interacting with each other. You got things like the incel movement, you've got the toxic masculinity stuff and all that. So there's a lot of negative stuff that's happening apart from the vaccine. And I said I was going to end on a positive note. A lot of that negative stuff we can actually also address. And it's a lot easier to address than cracking this nut of getting the professionals to wake up to the problem that may be with this novel genetic injection product. And in fact, there are people doing this already. So if you want to look up somebody else who is sort of on this trail, Katie in the United States, who was recently brought out by John Anderson to give a talk in Sydney, has started a new dating website for young people in their 20s. And she's literally getting people, I shared it with my son, it's called a database that she keeps. And you just send in, your data. It's like a regular website, I guess, system, like you put in the data that you would for an online dating system to her system, but she personally is the matchmaker. So it's a matchmaking exercise. And she just looks, around the country for people who would potentially be suitable. And then you are committed, if you do get matched, you're committed to having at least 3 one-hour dates with this other person, whether it's online or in person. And so she's trying to bring back essentially what we used to have a couple of generations ago, which is that families who knew their children well and knew other families would suggest people and sort of arrange meetings, and it wouldn't be like you have to do it. It's not like arranged marriages or whatever, but it's just a little bit of help, and my goodness, the people in their 20s, they do need a little bit of help, and they need to, have the other sex sort of presented in a positive light to them as well. So you can all help.
Men need to be allowed to woo them. Yeah. I've worked with old people all my life, and you meet people, women who say, my husband wooed me for an entire summer before I finally agreed to a date. He can't do that now. Second date, she says, no, he's a stalker. But I just want to go back to fertility. We were locked down in Melbourne for 9 months. We had 9 of them, the most lockdowns. At the time, I was expecting there to be a baby boom, because there's only so much Netflix you can consume. So you would expect there.
Yeah, I thought that too.
What, has there been a boom at all, or does the data say that?
There was a
spike.
So
I was expecting that too. Actually,
spike, and Dr. Kimberly Biss talks about it, and she calls them the Rona babies. So there was, a little.
There was a
spike.
tiny bit of a blip. It depends on the country, though.
But you would
And,
expect an
obviously,
explosion of
It depends how good their internet connection on Netflix was. Yeah, it's multivariate.
yeah.
Yeah.
And look, and not forget about the blokes. Half the population are blokes, and hashtag blokes for babies. It's time for the blokes to. It's one of the key roles. Protect our women, protect our babies.
Has their sperm been affected? Has their sperm been affected? Because early on, it was clear the Japanese were stating it, that the spike protein resides in the ovaries and the testes. So is there tests going now where men can find out whether they're fertile?
So David Beaker in Canada has been looking at that from the sperm at the sperm level, and he was mentioning this in a group chat a couple of weeks ago, and I said, what about the eggs, right? Because the ovaries is the biggest worry here. And as he said, and is the case with all of this, there's no money. There's no money to go into this research. And that's the problem, that we so desperately need to look at this. I think Kim and Hannah, as Hannah Parika, who's our Finnish IVF biologist, both of them have big sort of red flags and concerns around what these spikes might or might not have done to the eggs and what that means for the long-term fertility of generations to come. But again, I just don't feel sperm is affected temporarily.
Dr. Dan says it's okay.
I don't know who Dr. Dan is, but I really am very wary of encroaching onto the fertility panel. You're going to hear over the coming weeks and not saying the right thing, but they all have concerns. It'd be great, watch the roundtable if you can before you come to follow-up sessions, and then you'll hear what it's about. And also, hopefully, you had some specific questions prepared that you might want to ask those specialists.
The South Korean doctor is still seeing spike in semen.
So, I mean, the reason not to worry as much about the sperm, of course, is because the sperm get regenerated, right? I mean, that's the basic thing. And the eggs are all there at 20 weeks of gestation. So it's just a question, if you still have spike in your body, if you're a man, you could still potentially have some effect, right? But the question is then how many people still have spike in their body after they've been vaxxed? And again, we address this in the brownstone piece. So, I think that the problem is more on the eggs than the sperm, but it's not a non-problem for the sperm.
Yeah, I understand. But it'd be devastating to a young male too to find out he's infertile. That would be devastating.
Donna's brought up the 82%. She's disappeared. That's the piece that Paul and Gigi were just talking about before. And Kim, hopefully next week we'll talk about that more. But it's basically a furphy poisoning the well. The real clinical experience has been seen repeatedly is a doubling of miscarriage rates, and that's massive. There it is again. Yeah. So a lot of people reported on it. Even Dr. James Thorpe, who wrote the book. I've forgotten the name. What was it? It's gone. But anyway, very, very famous and deeply respected OBGYN who's been championing this space for a long time. It's a really complex piece that is just muddied the waters, and that's it. The argument is by several authors that was done deliberately to hide, as Paul was saying, the real truth, which was a doubling, which is massive. A doubling of the miscarriage rate is absolutely massive. But if you're comparing that to 82%, it's like, not interested. So anyway, our panel will talk about that one.
We don't need to poison the well.
So this is a 4-part series. So who's coming on next, Roz? Is this next Sunday?
So Kimberly Biss, hopefully, I've just got to speak to Renee Lau to see if those two can come on together. And then we've got
and that'll be a pre-recorded.
Yeah, that'll be a pre-recorded. Renee's actually coming to Australia, believe it or not, to Perth, sadly, so we won't get to see her. So we just want to see if we can maybe get something recorded this week that we can show next Sunday. But I'm going to get onto that first thing in the morning.
Sure. Then let us know. Is there anything else apart from that? Thanks for coming on. I'm glad that the 80% that I heard you mention isn't true, because that's what I was thinking one of you would say. I actually feel it's more than double, though, simply from the stories I'm hearing in hospitals, from people working in hospitals, midwives, who secretly tell me they're seeing far more than double, but not 80%. But
yeah, it's hard to tell with miscarriage because a lot's not reported. A lot of people don't even know, so they don't go to hospitals. But you know, when the stillbirths, those sorts of things, that's a whole nother one, because that's something that is seen. So.
And then to help with it, our government is offering $4,500 for an abortion. Isn't that nice? Isn't that good?
I didn't know that. Are you kidding me?
Haven't you heard?
No,
yeah, full-term abortion. Full-term abortion, $4.5 grand. So that's Joanna. I think Joanna Murray. What's that doctor called? Paul.
Joanna Howe.
The young Indian one. Yeah, she's amazing.
Joanna Howe.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's incredible. So she's
sorry,
I've not heard of that before, but I've seen her stuff. Yeah.
It's a loophole in their policy, apparently. So yeah, we're in strange times.
Wow.
We're in strange. Even the fact that we have full-time abortions legal around the whole country, by having it legal, I'm sorry, that means it's actually morally okay now. So everyone goes, oh, that's terrible, that's terrible. Well, the government has stated that that's morally okay. That's how far from home we've drifted. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Gigi. It's an honor to have you on. You're a superstar, so we're really special. It's a really special night to have you on. I wish it was about something funny though, and something light. But you know what I mean. But it would be fun to have you on with Steve Keen again. That'd be fun.
That would be a real
yeah, it'd be like an MMA fight.
Yeah, go team Gigi.
And Roz, congratulations to you for all the great work you're doing, Roz. And
thank you.
And I know how hard you work, and even getting on my back to get all this up. I'm really glad that you did. It's so important. I was just more frightened because I actually had no idea what you guys were going to say. So I was more frightened that you were going to say something that literally was going to break all of our hearts. So there's still hope. There's still hope.
Look, absolutely. And I think that's a really key piece. You know, we can go into the drama, you know, and all these awful things we're seeing, but ultimately, you know, I really do believe in the power of humanity. People are good, even people that are doing other things than what we are. And we need to, even, you know, several times tonight we said on that side, them on that side. We're not on sides. We're all together. That's that divide and conquer nonsense, right? And that's the piece we need to bring together. That if we can come back to our collective humanity, get these, you know, reproductive health medicos that we need to come in and look at this data, to be able to do it without the shame, without all the defenses, without pharma. I mean, let's face it, bloody pharma, what they're throwing into all of this mix, then we can sort it out. I have great hope. I don't see it as, you know, Armageddon. And I think sort of framing it in that way is about the worst thing we can do.
Yeah.
Can we hear the Freebie song?
Good. Did you like that?
Yeah, can we hear it again? That was a bit
lovely, actually. Yeah, I really liked that.
Do you know when I wrote that?
Did you
1 hour
that?
before this? Yeah. 1 hour before this show.
Did you do the music?
The whole video and everything, yeah. Not the music, that's AI, but I wrote all the lyrics. But it's lyrics to put the video together 1 hour before the show. Yeah, brilliant. That's the magic of AI. Yeah. Okay, guys. Gigi, enjoy your time in Brussels.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on. I hope other people from the resistance look up liberamentis.org as well, which I'll put, you know, can give you the link. And it's a great.
Your school sounds fascinating.
It's awesome. It's awesome to be here. Yeah. It's an awesome experience, and I would definitely check it out. I'll send you the link.
Yeah, no worries. All right, stay in touch, Roz. I'm no doubt I'm going to hear from you all week. Paul, I love you as always. It doesn't diminish. This is the B song. Good night, everybody.
Historically, we are the debris, forgotten faces, never more to be. Instead of legends fighting for something that had no guarantees, living ghosts, we chose to live and die as their worker bees. didn't we break out from their hide? Why didn't we follow our own sun to another life? Why didn't we scroll over all their flowers? Brothers and sisters, it's okay to be brothers and sisters, it's time to be freedom of movement, freedom of thought, freedom to choose, freedom to talk, freedom of religion and association, freedom of the press, freedom to be you, freedom to be you, freedom to be me. I can feel your secret vibrations like our last fading song. It's time, oh, it's time to be free. I can hear your vibrations like a final human cry. Oh, it's time, oh, it is time to be way past time to be